I think I always need to put the Canadian economy in context. We're seeing some results, especially in terms of employment, that are better than we've ever seen before. We're literally at the lowest levels of unemployment since we've been keeping statistics. We have the highest workforce participation among workforce, people in the working age population than we've ever seen. So those are really positive indicators. But we have to recognize that trade is a really important issue, and that what we're seeing between the US and China has the potential for being problematic. That's why you're seeing downgrades in global growth. But I'm always one that takes a look at what the positives are. I mean, we're seeing, yes, a slight downgrade in terms of expectations, but we're still seeing positive growth expectations. We've seen in Canada an uptick in recent months. We went through a bit of a challenge last year with oil prices. So I'm still optimistic, but we need to get through some of these issues. We need to reinforce the importance of a rules-based trading system that's benefited pretty well all developed countries, including making a huge difference for those most impoverished in our world. So we need to get back to that.
You had long identified the gap in our PHARMACARE system for Canadians who are not covered either by government programs or private programs. The PHARMACARE plan that's on the table now is much broader than that. Are you prepared to embrace that with the full cost that will come with it?
We have been pretty clear that we know that there's two really big issues in PHARMACARE that we need to get at. The costs in Canada, they're just too high. We are among the highest cost countries in terms of getting access to PHARMACARE anywhere in the world. And the challenge is we don't have everyone covered. So we need to address both those issues. The report did address both those issues. We need to take the time to consider what next steps are. But under any next step, what we do want to get to, no matter what, is a universal coverage for Canadians. It's critically important. And what we also need to think about is how do we implement this that makes sense? We've got a situation where we have 10 provinces, 3 territories, and there will be negotiations required to get there. So we need to do this in a way that considers the goals and the implementation challenges in front of us, and that's what we're going to think about.
Would you be prepared, though, to go to an election on a platform that says there's going to be a $15, $16 billion cost of a new program?
I'm not ready to answer the question. I think we really do need to consider the report, consider the implementation approach, and certainly it's going to be one of the discussions that we're going to be having during the course of our election. That's certainly the case.
We have a big decision coming up on Trans Mountain. Eagerly anticipated. In a way, it's a bit of a no-win because there will be people who are not happy, not satisfied, regardless of what happens next week.
We've always been focused on doing this the right way. We've been really clear that we're going to look at this next Tuesday, considering all of the things that we've done in response to the Court of Appeal decision that set us back. That work has been ongoing. We've been consulting with Indigenous peoples. We've been listening to those who are concerned with the issue. So we have an important decision to take. I'm looking forward to that decision. But what I want Canadians to know is we're going to do that in consideration of what we've been given as an appropriate way to get this done.
Once there's clarity, one imagines that potential buyers will be more serious. Is that the next step here? Is that something you might perhaps like to resolve before an election?
I want to take you back to why we own this pipeline. I mean, we own this pipeline because we had a political problem that was creating an impasse for a private sector owner. So that impasse, that challenge hasn't gone away. The project hasn't had risk removed. So what we've always said is we want to find a way that there's a path for the private sector to be engaged in this project. Next Tuesday will be a really important marker. But one way or another, we want this to be in the private sector over the long term. We don't think this is a role that government should play over the long term, and that's going to be a consideration that we take, in the weeks, months to come. It's not something that we're focused on right now because we're looking towards next week.
We have this report from this expert panel on sustainable finance. Many times reports like this are full of good ideas that get thrown in a drawer. How do you make sure this is actually a plan that is put into action, regardless of what happens in October?
I think we are taking this report very seriously. I think There will be among Canadians a sense that we need to deal with both the risks around climate change and the opportunities that present themselves. So this report today is really important in helping us to get at those opportunities. How do we take what we have in Canada, which is a really competitive financial sector, lots of companies that are very forward-looking, how do we turn that into more economic opportunity? I think that this report will give us a roadmap to think about how we do that. So we're going to look at it very seriously. We really appreciate the work that's been done. There'll be more work to do.
There's this growing concern about kind of an east-west divide in this country, provinces that aren't signed up for carbon pricing. Are we on the same page on the issues that matter?
There is going to be constant discussion around how we deal with what we see as a really big issue around climate change and the way we approach it. I think that Canadians more broadly recognize when they see the climate disasters, the floods in the east and the fires in the west, that this is real. So the challenge as you're going through change is that people have different points of view on how you go through it. We are pretty clear. We want to address it head on. We want to do it in the most economically effective way. So putting a price on pollution is actually going to drive the kind of investment decisions that people can make towards tomorrow to reduce carbon emissions. They're going to help all of us to be more appropriately taking our decisions. But we've also said we're going to drive lower carbon emissions while protecting families from the costs. So, as this debate is raging, the reality is, the overwhelming majority of families are not going to see any impact because we're sending the money right back to them. And that means that we're going to get the advantage of driving investment decisions from businesses, and families will not be impacted day to day because they will have the ability to continue doing what they're doing or maybe use that money for other things.
Finally, you just implemented this new plan to ban single-use plastics. I know a lot of the details are still to come. Producers are very concerned about having to take ownership of the life cycle of the plastic they produce. How do you reassure them that this isn't going to be a massive cost to them?
Our long-term expectation is this will be not only a Canadian approach, but it'll be a global approach. We clearly cannot keep using single-use plastics in a way that is not recycling them for the future. So the way we reinforce this importance is just by looking at what's going on around the world, by looking at the statistics. Only 9% of our plastics are actually being recycled. With the respect to the producers, the people who are producing this, what we've said is it'll be science-based. We'll look at the places where there's not some sort of alternative, and we'll make sure that we do that in a way that allows for appropriate transition. For places where there's a clear alternative, think of the stir stick, the plastic stir stick. You can use a wooden stir stick. Mm-hmm. So there's some quick places where you can actually make a big difference, but there'll be other places where we'll have to look at the science, we'll have to figure out the right way to implementation, and I think that will help industry to see how they can actually transition in a way that makes sense. I was at the Consumer Goods Forum in Vancouver this week, and many big, huge companies from around the world that use plastics, they recognize that this is the way the world is going. So it's about how we create a transition that makes sense.